Yeah, go ahead, Praveen.
Ki- Kindly explain regarding use of oral antidiabetic drugs as concomitant medication for eye gas.
Pardon, can you repeat the question, Praveen?
Yes, sir. Kindly explain regarding concomitant use of oral antidiabetic drugs with eye gas.
Acha. So the drugs that can be used along with insulin, degludec and aspart. Okay. So the greatest advantage of this co-formulation insulin, degludec and aspart is that it is compatible with all of the medications that are present in the armamentarium of our type 2 diabetes management, starting from metformin to the GLP-1 receptor agonist. That is, everything is compatible with. You can combine this with metformin, you can combine this with sulfonylureas, and only thing is you have to be little bit cautious when you combine with sulfonylureas because the patient may get into hypoglycemias, and the only contraindication being, according to the guidelines of the American Diabetes Association, insulin should not be combined with thiazolidine. The only one thiazolidine we have is the pioglitazone. So, barring that pioglitazone, it can be combined with the alpha glucosidase inhibitors, and it can be combined with the DPP4 inhibitors, the SGLT2 inhibitors, and GLP-1 receptor agonists. So all the drugs can be combined except the thiazolidine, the pioglitazone, as of now in India.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So the next question is again related to this. Use of aspirin and statins in patients with diabetes mellitus for more than 5 years.
Acha. So the primary prevention of aspirin is a debatable issue, is a controversial issue right now. Earlier they used to promote every patient must be put on this particular low dose aspirin, that is 75 milligram aspirin. But now, as far as the primary prevention is concerned, the conditions apply that if the patient is suffering from type 2 diabetes mellitus without any comorbidities, you don't need to start aspirin. And the indication for this particular aspirin is the any comorbidities like the associated hypertension and the dyslipidemia and the family history of heart disease or the family history of strokes and cigarette smoking. These are all the conditions wherein that demands the role of aspirin, the low dose 75 milligram in our scenario and 81 milligram to 162 milligram in the Western scenario in primary prevention. And as far as this particular the role of statins, statins can be given to all type 2 diabetes patients, irrespective of their baseline lipid profile or the baseline LDLC also. And as a secondary prevention, aspirin is almost mandatory, and in combination with the P2Y12 inhibitors like the clopidogrel or the prasugrel or the ticagrelor and the ticlopidin, and it is to be the situation demands where the single antiplatelet agent is required, and where the adapt, that is dual antiplatelet therapy is indicated, that is to be decided seeing the clinical scenario. And the latest studies suggest that even after a PCI, that is earlierly we used to call it PTCA with stenting, or even the cabbage also, we are using this the aspirin and the combination of either the clopidogrel or the ticagrelor actually, for the fear of the risk of the increased incidence of bleeding, we confine this DAPT. Earlier it was for 1 year and 2 years. Now it has been after the Twilight study has coming to vogue. The recent results rolled out from Twilight study has revealed that you can use aspirin until 3 months along with the ticagrelor 60 milligram or 90 milligram BD, and later on you can discontinue aspirin and you can continue the ticagrelor for a long period, probably the lifetime. And statins, once it is started, it is a marathon run. You can never stop a statin. See, stop and start statin is worse than not initiating the statin. So once you initiate a moderate intensity, the statin or the high intensity statin, once it is started, you should continue it for lifetime of the patient.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that answer, sir. Sir, the next question is, uh, have you compared Glargine U300 with Idagas?
Yes, absolutely. It comes in close comparison with this particular the brand name is Toujeo now. The Glargine U300 is I don't say it is superior to insulin degludec, but more or less when compared to insulin Glargine U100, it comes nearer to this particular insulin degludec with regards to the increase in the time in range and the improvements in the glycemic variability, and with less number of nocturnal hypos.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer. Next question is, with single dose of Idagas once a day, can we control TPG of other two meals?
No, absolutely not. See, the basic funda behind giving the once a dose, that is to start with the initiation of insulin is in the affordable segment is to start with this the co-formulation, the insulin degludec and aspart, that is to be used as a starter actually, and it is to be used with the largest meal after deciding inquiring into the patient dietary habits. You can decide which is the largest meal, either the breakfast or the lunch or the dinner. You can to some extent you can maintain this 24-hour basal control, and along with the large meal you can control the prandial control, but not the it's not a total control actually. So if you want to go for a total control, you have to give this insulin degludec and aspart twice a day. This is especially the once a day insulin degludec and aspart is called the basal plus therapy, which is a novel therapy, which is a novel co-formulation, and all the bodies have started recognizing this that you should start with this particular molecule in case there is non-affordability. That's it. The setback is the affordability becomes the biggest barrier in our country, where the patient has to purchase from his or her own pocket towards the expenditure of the drugs and all, and the doctor consultation and all the expenditure related to the medical expenditure, including the laboratory investigations and all. Unlike the Western scenario where the governments have taken like NIS in US, the NHS in UK, they offer a wide variety of insurance, comprehensive insurance policies, which covers from headache to coronary artery bypass. Everything is covered under this particular the comprehensive insurance, and we have to improve this the insurance health insurance system in India. Until then, it becomes a big major task for the patients for the chronic therapy segment like diabetes, especially the diabetes and the hypertension and the dyslipidemia and the associated diseases like coronary artery disease or the strokes are the complications and the comorbidities associated with diabetes.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. There is another question, sir.
Yes, Praveen.
For insulin initiation, which is commonly preferred, pre-mix insulin or pre-run insulin?
Yeah, first, as per the recommendations, you have to start the basal insulin, because the funda behind starting the basal insulin is you have to fix the fasting first. So then only you will be able to catch up this, particularly the postprandial glucose. So to start with, it is not the premix. You can start with, it depends. If the A1C is very high, you cannot put the patient on a basal insulin. And if the patient has got lot of the comorbidities, you cannot put the patient on basal insulin along with the existing OADs, because it's not going to take care of the A1C in a much better way. That is what the studies have shown, the comparison between the insulin degludec and aspart and insulin alone. The reductions were meager with the insulin, basal insulin, and the results were much better with the insulin co-formulation. But still, as a protocol, if the patient is reasonably good and stable with no much comorbidities and on 3 OADs, you can start with 10 units of this particular basal insulin. If it works out, it's well and good, and you can escalate it until the 40 units of basal insulin. And anything above 40 units of basal insulin is virtually useless if it doesn't come to the target, and it is high time you have to stop this, and either you can go for the biphasic premixed human insulins, or the biphasic premixed the analog insulins, or the insulin co-formulations. That's what I every time say, the insulin degludec and aspart. That is only in the affordable segment. Because these are analogs are the designer insulins, which are little bit costlier, and affordability becomes the biggest barrier. And still the time tested and time trusted molecule is the biphasic premixed the human insulin, that is the human mixtard.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the answer, sir. Next couple of questions I would like to ask from my end, sir.
Yeah, please, Praveen.
Yes, sir. Continue in the discussion, like the uses of and the advantages of pen device was also discussed.
Yeah.
But still we see many patients are still on YS insulin, sir.
Yeah.
So how can we address this issue, and we can make the the compliance better with the newer device? Can you please share?
Yeah, it all depends on how you counsel the patient, Praveen. The relationship should be like a cordial relationship between the patient and the doctor. That makes the bond very much stronger. And you should explain the patient that there are much more comfortable devices when compared to the vial and syringes, which is a cumbersome business actually. So they either you can go for the use and throw flex pens, which are little bit expensive, and you can go for this Novopen 4, which offers the precise delivery of the dosage until at least the studies have shown until the down the line 5 years, it delivers very accurately the dosage of insulin with the Novopen 4. So it all depends on how you counsel the patient, how best you can offer the pen to the patient, how best you can impress upon the patient that it is virtually more advanced and virtually painless, and you can deliver the exact dose of insulin what you would like to deliver. See, this is how it happens in the clinical practice. You should have some patience when you are dealing with the patients actually, and you should be able to develop a rapport between the patient and the doctor, and then only all these things can be made possible, Praveen.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that insight, sir. Next question I would like to ask is on the management of steroid-induced hyperglycemia in the post-follow-up or the post-discharge period, sir.
Acha, so in the current scenario of the COVID pandemic,
Yes, sir.
do you mean to refer to this COVID pandemic, or in general the steroid usage for so most of the times we don't use steroids for the other infections, like what we are seeing in the current scenario, the COVID pandemic, where the steroids are the game changers actually. So in the hospital admitted patients, let it be in the wards, or let it be in the ICU setup, whether the patient is on the oxygen or the mechanical ventilation, the time of discharge, even during that particular course of steroid, you should always cover the patient with the basal bolus insulin. And at the time of discharge, the basal insulin is the drug of choice, as recommended by the most of the experts all over the world. You should start a basal insulin to the patient at the time of discharge, the patient who is on corticosteroid therapy.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that insight, sir. There are no more questions in the question section, sir.
Yeah, if there are no questions, yeah, good, well and good, Praveen.
Yes, sir. I would like to ask the last question from my side.
Yeah, please, Praveen.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, we've got another question, sir, before that.
Yeah.
Okay. Patient's fasting blood glucose is normal, whereas his PPBS is high and requires insulin with 2 or 3 OADs in the morning and allowed by. I think Dr. Prabhu has shared one of his case scenarios, sir. I'll repeat it again, sir. FPS is normal.
Yeah, fasting plasma glucose is normal, PPBS is abnormal, and the patient is on 2 or 3 OADs.
Yes, sir. And he requires insulin.
Yeah.
Why is the question, sir?
Why the patient should be on insulin? See-
Morning alone and why?
See,
Yeah,
the
I read out the exact.
yeah, please, read out once.
Yes, sir. A patient's FPS is normal.
Okay.
Whereas PPBS is high
Okay.
and requires insulin to be OAD. By morning alone and why? This is the exact question, sir.
See, the question is not said properly, but okay. What I come to understand is that the patient's fasting is normal and he has got an abnormal postprandial glucose, and the patient is on 2 or 3 OADs, and it's high time you have to switch over to insulin. And what type of insulin and what time you should initiate? I think that is the question. I think.
Yes, sir.
And if the question is why you should initiate insulin, is to reduce the glucotoxicity and to reduce the glucose variability and to maintain the time in range. This is if the patient, the doctor had asked, why should you initiate insulin? This is my answer for that. And at what time you should initiate, depends on the largest meal, if at all the patient is affordable. When he is able to go for the insulin co-formulation, you can start with the once daily dosage of the insulin degludec and aspart with the largest meal. You can start with the 10 units and you can keep on escalating, and that is the reason why we use this. And in the patient who is not able to afford all these things, you can start with the poor man's basal insulin, that is almost the NPH, only always the NPH. But NPH once a day doesn't work out at all. It has to be given twice a day at least. And even the glargine also, to tell you honestly, it is not a true 24-hour acting insulin. The duration of action of this particular insulin glargine depends on the pancreatic beta cell reserve. That is, in type 1 it works until 18 to 20 hours, and in type 2 it works until 20 to 22 hours, but not 24 hours. So sometimes and most of the times in the type 1 diabetes mellitus, we use this insulin glargine twice a day. And this particular the type 2 diabetes, we generally tend to use it once, because the patients have at least some pancreatic beta cell functioning reserve actually, whereas type 1 there is not even a single functioning beta cell. So you have to use this basal bolus regime if at all you want to go for this basal insulin plus bolus insulin. in a type 1 patient.
Yes, sir. Dr. Prabhu has replied that the question is why FPS is normal but PBPS is right.
Acha, it's acha, yeah. Now I got the question. See, I told you during my lecture itself, the most the pathognomic feature of type 2 diabetes is the first one to raise is all the time the postprandial glucose. That is because of the two reasons. That is, first one being the absent or the loss of this particular first phase of insulin response, and the second reason being the blunted second phase of insulin response. That is the reason where there is a mismatch between the food intake and the insulin release from the pancreas. So all the time the prandial insulin goes up. That is why we find most of the times the fasting is normal, and the medicines also you use for the treatment of diabetes before initiating insulin, like metformin. If you give it at bedtime, it takes care about this particular the fasting blood glucose by reducing the hepatic glucose output, and it reduces the insulin resistance by acting at the level of muscle, fat, and the liver. And some drugs like lipizide, it's a wonderful drug to control the fasting plasma glucose. So if the patient is on some atypical situations, like whether the patient is on multiple OADs, maybe the fasting is normal, and maybe the postprandial is abnormal, and most of the times in the Indian scenario the postprandial is all the time high. And I've told you earlier and every time in my lecture also, there are 7 major studies which have they concluded that, including the landmark trial, the Honolulu study, which confirmed that the normal fasting plasma glucose with an abnormal postprandial blood glucose is always is a classical future indicator of the future cardiovascular disease. So you have to control this postprandial. The total control, that's what I mean. Every time I tell the in my lectures that the total, we aim at the total control, not only the fasting, not only the postprandial, and 24-hour control we target. Then the A1C goes down drastically. We can reach to the level of 6.5 to 7% of A1C. So to achieve this total glycemia, you should target both the fasting and the postprandial. And the best way to counter it is, okay, you can start with metformin as a mandatory drug to start with. Is in type 2 diabetes is nothing but metformin, unless otherwise it is contraindicated. And nowadays the latest funda is that treating of type 2 diabetes should be like you should hit it hard and hit it early, and don't wait for too long period, like 3 months with so the metformin, slowly starting from 250 milligram to 500 milligram, then to 1000 milligram, and another month with 1500 milligram, and another month with 2000 milligram. By the time is lost. And the latest research results have rolled out that the initial 10-year period of the glycemic control in type 2 diabetes is directly related to the future complications, especially the myocardial infarction and the stroke, the cardiovascular complications. So you have to hit early, hit hard, so that the first 10 years of the duration in the disease course of this particular type 2 diabetes, you have to maintain an absolute euglycemia. It doesn't mean that you can relax after 10 years. It is a marathon run. You should always try to maintain the total glycemia, that is the glycemic triad or the glycemic pentad or the glycemic hexad. There are several terminologies which are used. So the glycemic triad is you should maintain the fasting plasma glucose as well as the postprandial glucose, and the A1C. These three should be within the normal limits. And the glycemic pentad is the addition of glycemic variability with quality of life, and that is been recently changed. The quality of life is been taken from that glycemic pentad, and hypoglycemia is introduced in place of that, and the glycemic hexad is the fasting plus the postprandial plus the A1C plus the glycemic variability plus the hypoglycemias and the nocturnal hypoglycemias. That is a complicated term, the glycemic hexad. So we should aim at this particular, the new terminology is you should always maintain the patient in the time in the range, not time below the range where the patient gets into hypoglycemia, not time the above the range, that is hyperglycemia, that is defined as anything above the 180 millimeters per deciliter of glucose is considered as time above the range, and anything that is less than 70 milligrams per deciliter of the blood glucose is considered as time below the range, and from 70 to 180 is the time in range. You have to maintain most of the time, you have to see to that the patient remains in time in range. And the second important aspect is the glycemic variability is very very important with regards to this diabetes. That also we see in the patients suffering from hypertension. The blood pressure variability also must be maintained. So insulin will take care of this glycemic variability, and that too this particular the insulin degludec and aspart given twice a day will take care of the glycemic variability, and there will not be any fluctuations in the blood glucose levels. So when you improve the glycemic variability, and the patient's A1C also becomes normal. The pitfalls of A1C I always mention. A1C gives you the mean plasma glucose, the average estimated glucose, but it never tells you whether the patient has gone into hypoglycemias or the hyperglycemias. That is the biggest drawback with this particular the HbA1c. And the second flaw with the HbA1c is that doesn't give you any clue about glycemic variability. These are the two flaws with this particular A1c. That is, it will not give you any signal with regards to the hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. That will give you the estimated average blood glucose, and the percentage for the last the 3 months, like it is 7% or 8% or 9%, but it doesn't give any clue about this the glycemic variability. So nowadays the SMBG is the only way, and the for blood sugar and the home blood pressure monitoring is the only method to counter this blood pressure variability. So these are the two important terminologies you have to keep in mind: the time in range and the glycemic variability and the blood pressure variability.
Yes, sir. So the next question is, during diagnosis of diabetes, at what level can we start insulin?
Acha, at the time of diagnosis.
Okay.
Yeah, at the time of diagnosis, if you have the A1C with you, the patient's A1C with you, if it is around or more than 9% of HbA1c, it is a compelling and definite indication to initiate insulin, first of all. This is by the recommendations of the American Diabetes Association, as well as the American College of Endocrinology, as well as the American Association for the Clinical Endocrinologists. So this is the level where you by A1C, and if the patient presents to your clinic with high fasting blood sugars and with high postprandial blood sugars, which indicate that the patient has got glucotoxicity, and you have to reduce the glucotoxicity only by means of initiating insulin. You cannot do it with the other oral agents. And the most important point to be remembered at the time of the diagnosis, always make it a point to look into the ketone bodies, whether the patient is in the ketonuria or the diabetic ketoacidosis, and that becomes the compelling indication for insulin. Nothing should be used other than the regular or short acting insulins at that particular time.
Yes, sir. The next question is 3 a.m. blood glucose monitoring still to be checked, sir?
Yeah, the 7 point formula of blood sugar monitoring is nothing but the fasting and the 2 hour post breakfast and pre lunch and the 2 hour post lunch and pre dinner and the 2 hour post dinner and the 3 a.m. reading. Why we particularly see this 3 a.m. reading is to differentiate between the dance phenomena and the Somagi phenomena actually. Both are the fasting hyperglycemias and one is associated with the hypoglycemia followed by the hyperglycemia, and the second is the followed by only the hyperglycemia. To differentiate the dance phenomena and the Somagi phenomena, we rarely look into this, which is commonly seen in type 1 patients rather than the type 2 patients.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that answer. So, the last question I would like to ask from my end, sir.
Yeah, please.
There are no more questions.
Yeah, please, Praveen.
Yes, sir. Considering the superior HbA1c control, better FPG and also PPG control, lower episodes of both nocturnal hypoglycemia as well as confirmed hypoglycemia, and also dosing with the major limb. So when it comes to quality of life of patients, so does all these advantages of IDAGAS translate into better quality of life of patients in clinical practice?
Absolutely. That's what I've been telling all the time. See, these are all the factors which influence in improving the quality of life. So, insulin degludec aspect definitely is going to meet all the demands. So, with regards to this particular what you have mentioned, and automatically when the demands are met very satisfactorily, and automatically the quality of life, the quality of living improves automatically, and patient will have a hassle-free diabetes period actually.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that.
See, our aim is not only to maintain the glycemia. There is much beyond the glycemia, control of glycemia. So that is to prevent the microvascular as well as the macrovascular complications. So all the time I say ABC. A is for A1C. All the time see to that the patient remains somewhere around some 6.5 to 7% of A1C, and blood pressure. B stands for blood pressure. That is 120 to 130 milligram of this particularly the mmHg of this particular systolic and the 80 mm of mercury of this particular diastolic, and all the time the C stands for cholesterol. And nowadays in diabetes the protocols have been changed. Earlier we used to be very happy if the patient has got an LDLC of less than 100. No more it is like it is less than 70 we should aim at in normal patients with no comorbidities. And if the patient is got comorbidities like cardiovascular diseases and strokes, and you have to go below 70 to 55 and to below 40, and the latest guidelines that's what they say is you have to target the LDLC below 30 milligram per deciliter in a very high risk patient with multiple comorbidities with diabetes. The goal is less than 30 milligram per deciliter, Praveen. Because this is according to the European Atherosclerosis Society, the latest recommendations, and the International Atherosclerosis Society, and our body also, the Lipid Association of India, that is called LAI. All of the bodies have come to a common consensus that the patients suffering from diabetes with very high risk factors, the comorbidities, the level should be somewhere around or below 30 milligram of LDLC. So when you target these three, diabetes, hypertension and cholesterol, then the patient is safe. Even you miss out one, the patient will land up in complications, Praveen. So all the time it's a multi-pronged approach. You need to take care of the glycemia, you need to take care of the blood pressure as well as the LDLC. You should always target the LDLC.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that insight, sir. There are no questions in the question section. So with this, we come to the end of panel discussion. So to the end of today's webinar, I would like to thank all the attending doctors for the questions and also for the patients. Doctor, I would like to thank Dr. Kesuri Krishnamohan sir and Dr. Kesuri Tirumala Devi for the wonderful presentation, also for answering all the questions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And I thank Novo Nordisk people for giving me this opportunity to be the speakers of the evening. And thanks Dr. Praveen for a nice and wonderful moderation as usual. And thanks a lot for my participants for patient listening. Thank you so much.